Hi there, and welcome to the Creative Operations Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Groom, and in this podcast, we'll be talking with creative operations leaders in all kinds of industries, from franchising to finance, from healthcare to hospitality and beyond. We'll be looking to uncover best practices and to see trends that are coming to help you keep your creative operations on brand and on budget at the same time. Enjoy. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Creative Operations Podcast 2.0. I am really pleased today to have joining us Heather Reid. Heather is the CEO and founder of Franchise Marketing Gurus. And the reason I'm excited about this is, for those of you who don't know, franchise marketers are probably the largest single segment of the Pike & Nine customer base. So we spend a lot of time in the franchise marketing world, and I have a feeling we can share some of the challenges and also some of the joys of working both with franchisors and their franchisees, a unique relationship, which I'm really excited to dive into. But before we begin, Heather, tell us a little bit about FMG and also about your journey into creative operations generally.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. I have been in the franchise and marketing industry for the past decade. I led the national franchise marketing for two franchise organizations, and so coached hundreds of partners successfully. And of course, I was on the franchisor side of the fence, which is kind of how I got to the journey of launching Franchise Marketing Gurus. Is I wanted to really be able to serve the franchisor and the franchisee and to educate and empower franchisees to become more successful and really learn how to drive their business. What I found was over the past decade is that about 95% of the partners that I was supporting who were coming into the systems that I managed is that they had no marketing experience. They had no idea about marketing and advertising. Salespeople would call them and make major promises. There was no tracking of outcomes, and they would, think that the sky was falling, and it just was horrible, this kind of gerbil wheel that they were on. So I really want to help them get off of that wheel and help them understand and be more empowered to make decisions that can scale their business with quantifiable outcomes. So then we know what works for them and then reallocate resources to the things that are not working to things that'll drive more value.
It's amazing. Early in the day for me in the advertising world, Groupon became a thing. And the Groupon salespeople were so aggressive in their feet on the street kind of approach to franchisees and offering them sort of this nirvana. Guaranteed results. Absolutely. You're going to fill your restaurant, or you're going to fill your store. You're going to get the traffic you want. And franchisees are terribly open to that possibility because as entrepreneurs, marketing is one of 20 different hats they have to wear. Yeah. And so let's dive into this question then. There's a strong impulse, right? You're almost in a way trying to sell marketing intelligence and marketing strategy to an audience that is really thinking about marketing tactics and results and not sort of the flow from one to the other, but rather trying to get to the end of it without having to go through all this stuff up front. How do you create the patience and the perspective that franchisees really need to see there is no one-stop quick fix to every marketing challenge?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was in the seat of leadership for these franchise organizations, it was always a lot of consulting and, hey, before you sign anything. And that's why I tell my clients now, and I preach it on social media, do not sign anything. Lean into your franchisor, lean into me, lean into other experts, but lean into your system before you sign anything. I mean, I had this one young lady, she signed an agreement. It was so egregious on the salesperson. And lo and behold, it was something we already had set up for them. It was an online reputation management platform and a directory listing platform, and she had signed up for it, not knowing that we already paid, a lot of money for this. And she was lucky that I was able to get her out of that agreement. But these marketers just need to be empowered, and it does take patience. And, if we think about learning a new language, this is basically a new language for them. There's a lot of acronyms they need to know. So, I write out a glossary and give them the glossary, and and then meet with them on a regular basis with the coaching and accountability and evaluating the outcomes. And, once they see a dashboard and you go over a dashboard with them, and I know you guys at Peak and Nine have dashboards, and to me, that's full transparency. And anyone who's doing business should have complete transparency to what they're doing, and full access, right? So, but it takes a while to learn those acronyms. So after like 3 or 4 months of going through a dashboard, you can kind of see the light bulbs go off, and they feel emboldened and they feel confident, and then that continues to grow. And as we meet, I say, okay, now your search impression score is low. What does that mean? So you kind of try to gamify it for them too and make it fun.
Sure. It sounds to me like almost like a marketing MBA in the franchise kind of segment. And the fact that it might take years, several years to really develop that kind of expertise, it doesn't come as a surprise to me, but I'm sure for many franchisees, it's a little bit of a learning curve. And here's why. Franchisees buy into the franchise with the assumption that the marketing and the brand is, if you will, already baked. And for sure, with great franchise brands, it is largely baked, but that executional component, that alphabet soup of acronyms and all those opportunities, and where you're spending your own money, those I think are the places where we often see franchisees either pause and not do enough, or make an impetuous decision, almost an impulse buy when they really need to be thinking about it from a strategic point of view. So you are working in really challenging waters. A question for you: when you think about again that complexity, do franchisees come to it with in your experience, with an understanding of the value of their brands, or do they really need to start by understanding the brand itself? Do they have sufficient foundation in the brand, or is it just the alphabet soup, or is it more, even fundamental than that?
I think it totally varies, right? There are some folks that come into franchising as a small percentage, but they do have some marketing background experience. And those folks, they get it quicker. And I want to go back that I don't think they need an MBA, right? I think they know how to be basic operators and then and understand data. But I also think that they need to have enough intelligence, enough common sense to lean into their franchisor and say, hey, and raise their hand. Hey, I really trained the folks over at Synergy Home Care. Do not sign anything. Send it to me. Let me advocate for you. Let me hold that vendor accountable. And what we're going to do is we're going to do that together. We're going to get on that call with them. So you're going to hear the questions I'm going to ask, and you're going to hear the terms that I'm asking. So many of these smaller shops, and maybe they don't mean to be unethical, but I think it quite is not to give a partner an exit strategy if results are not there after a period of time. And so I always tell them, make sure we get an exit strategy, because if we have tracking mechanisms in place, pixels, tracking numbers, whatever it may be, then we can say, okay, let's give this 60 days, or 120 days, 6 months, whatever it might be. Let's see how it performs. And if it's not getting where we need it to be, then let's cut bait and reallocate those funds. So I think it's an owner by owner situation. There are just some folks that they don't get it. They don't get it. And that's why you need to hire someone like myself or your organization, or lean into the franchisor to, get their support, because that's what they're supposed to be there for.
It's a really interesting point. One of the things that we've seen, we're more technology, right? So we would almost be a tool that you might use in partnership with a franchisee to help them execute across a broad variety of tactics. Of course, the platform doesn't tell you the essential thing. It doesn't make that essential decision of which tactics to apply and with what time frame and in what sequence. You do that. But here's what we've often seen across large franchise networks. It's an issue of scale, where the franchisee who doesn't know that they need to raise their hand doesn't really find a way to do what, you used a phrase twice so far in our conversation I really find compelling: lean into the franchisor organization, lean into the skills and the resources that entity can bring you. Because let's face it, you put a lot of money down up front, you've devoted your heart and soul to this business, and that franchisor is vested in your success. Now, how do we make that connection at scale is, to me, the challenge. And so we need, I think of a couple of environments that we're operating in today where the number of franchisees exceed 1,000. We need 10 of you, to offer up the right advice at the right time. But even with 10 of you, we still have the problem of when does a franchisee raise their hand? That's the challenge that I often find. Do you find that they sometimes just suffer in silence as opposed to seeking out the assistance they need?
They do, and I think in any organization, whether it be just a a public business or private business or a franchisor system, is that there's always going to be that percentage, and it's unfortunate, but there's also that always that bottom 25%, and it's that's the hard part. Like those folks, they just in many cases cannot get out of their own way, and they get stuck there, and I always want to help those people and champion them, but they're the ones that don't raise their hands. It's almost like the bottom 40% don't raise their hands. And that's where myself proactively would do that outreach, right? So I'd say I would look at that group and I'd say from a franchisor perspective for those who are listening who are franchisors, I would divide the company or the country into quadrants. And I'd say, let me look at that 70 to 60% of the lower performers in the system, not the bottom 20, right? And say, okay, let me rally these troops. Let me do small market meetings virtually and say, okay, here's an opportunity for you to grow your business. It's pretty turnkey. This is a program you can opt into. We're offering it. All you need to do is fill out the form and it's done for you. And those are the folks that they're not going to be able to do it themselves. But if we put an offer out to them and make it compelling and easy for them to opt into, then that does raise their business for them. It does help them serve more people and become more successful.
It also, I think it's a sign or an opportunity, I guess I should say, to build trust. When the salesperson, and I should not, I always need to remind myself not to speak ill of any vendor. Groupon has grown huge businesses. It's just that, as you say, it's tough to make concrete decisions with limited budgets and also with limited time and with, payroll. This is what I love about franchisees. Payroll is never more than 2 weeks away. Right. And so in that kind of a pressured environment, finding a way to lead those folks to programs they can trust and rely on that will deliver results is the key. And it seems to me that the franchisor organization faces another challenge because while there's multiple media types that are out there for these guys to choose among, there's also multiple platforms, right, that they need to master from a skill set. It's a lot to ask of somebody who really is focused on, meeting payroll in 2 weeks' time. And so what we've found is that creating a one-stop shop kind of kit for everything so that the first place you go to figure out what to do next has most of what you need, if not absolutely everything. And it also points quickly and easily to resources you can add on, and all of those things should come with that imprimatur from the brand that this is something you can trust. We're going to bring you vendors, resources, and creative assets that you can trust. All three of those things, that seems to me to be where folks can overcome their lack of experience in the marketing realm. And so I wanted to turn for a second, from the strategy side of things and the analysis of results. Which, when I say MBA, I often think that what you're doing for folks soaks in over the course of time, really over the course of years. But ultimately, they do begin to take the reins themselves. Because the decisions are not necessarily rocket science. Once you've got, the background, then it's really just a challenge of keeping up with marketing, which is just changing at lightning speed year after year after year, right? So I wanted to turn for a second to a challenge that doesn't go away, and that is creative. And leveraging the brand and doing it in a way that makes sense as an individual franchisee. Can you tell me a little bit about what you have seen in your work with franchisees, either in what we call brand compliance or in that leveraging of the brand?
Yeah, sometimes my heart dies a little bit inside when I see something off brand. It really hurts. And of course, brand policing is critical when you have a franchise organization because you've got everybody and all. It's kind of like having being on the bottom of a lake and having all the rocks there, and you don't know what's going to happen if you pick one up and turn it over, what you're going to find. But I do find in my history of leading organizations, what I would do is I would give them playbooks, just like you said. Hey, here are 20 options. Here are 10 options for this, or 5 options for this, and there would be totally planned out for them and strategic. But they would be turnkey. But like to your point, here are the trusted vendors that you can leverage for these things, right? And and as things, like Google did a big update. Gosh, I think it was last August, where all of a sudden you could not have any employees. I was leading a service-based organization, and so employee reviews were critical to keeping the bench deep. And all of a sudden, Google came out and said, "Hey guys, no more reviews for employees because they could be, illegitimate." Uh, and that was a turning point. And so making sure that that message got across to everybody, and that they weren't doing that, because in some instances, it really did kind of hurt their Google platform if they did. So I mean, say it again, and then say it a third time, and then send it in writing a few more times. Because I also find when you communicate with a large system, and you send, a lot of times, to streamline that communication, you have to send newsletters, right? And those can get long, even if you're doing 2 or 3 a month, because it's not just marketing, it's all the other departments in the organization as well. And you'll find that they're not reading it. And so it's almost like whack-a-mole. You gotta have multiple communication points and different communication strategies so they do get those critical messages.
I agree entirely. The notion, we were working with a bank, network of community banks, and one of the branch managers, when we went out to see what they thought of the communications that were coming to them and how our communications fit in there, she took me into her conference room. And there in the conference room, you couldn't see the surface of the desk because it was covered with all the communications that came from corporate in a single month. And so, of course, what we find as franchisors is we end up getting lost in the sauce of the very same spam we're trying to guide our franchisees away from. We find ourselves lost in that. And so, the notion that there's a place, this is something we've seen a lot at Pike and Nine. If we can get them to come to us when they're thinking about marketing, all of a sudden there's a receptive ear and a more knowledgeable eye to look. That's where this notion of creating a one-stop shop toolkit makes sense. But the challenge is, once you've got the toolkit, how do you ensure that they use it well? If you don't also do that, you could find yourself spending lots of time and money building, a place for everyone to come and not really addressing the problem of local chaos at all. We've seen that a ton.
I totally agree with that. And I also think that the bigger the organization gets, the more that becomes to be a hassle. Because the team is spread thin at HQ. Even if they scale with the team, I feel like maybe there's a quantity play with the franchisor. And so, we don't and when you're in a smaller organization, you have the ability and the time and the luxury of really investing a little more time, energy, and not necessarily strategy, but time and energy into nurturing those people and helping them level up. And I think when you get to large organizations, a lot of things are cookie cutter. And it's like, here's your resources. There you go. Boom. And one size fits all. And, ask a franchisee, their market's different, right?
Find fascinating about your business is that it requires just this full 360-degree skill set. You've got to be able to take a piece of brand creative, and make it a local franchisee's own without violating the guidelines. You've got to be able to look at media types and pick out the best ones right now. And then you've got to apply that creative envelope to that media. And then finally, you have to be able to analyze results. So you've got to be able to wear a data hat. That's a lot to ask one person. Right. And I think of a restaurant support center for one of the brands we work with. And I just watched the number of franchisees growing while the number of people in the support center doesn't grow as fast. And what gets lost in that kind of tension, I think, is the time it takes to really hold someone's hand, not just once, sometimes twice, 3 times, 4 times. Sooner or later, that franchisee will get it. But you've got to give it the time. And that takes people, that takes humans, which is not a message everybody always wants to hear these days, in these days of AI.
It's interesting. I tend to, so I've launched this new franchise marketing gurus and with the intentions of helping the Zors and the Zs. And it's interesting. I've been working with two smaller startups, right? Maybe one of them they both have around between 5 and 15 locations, right? They don't have the foundational work. And sometimes it's in the development side for Fran Dev, and sometimes it's on the franchisee side for marketing programs. So it's kind of interesting that I'm helping both universes. And I think with a younger organization, there's so much excitement and aspiration, but yet not knowing what they don't know, but wanting to do the right things, right? Which is why they come to me. But then you get into a mature organization and they kind of lose that magic a little bit, I think. You get into the day to day. You do. And so I'm really enjoying working with these younger founders because they're just all about it. They want to immerse themselves. They want it to be perfect. They want it to be great and to really add value to the system. And I just think when you get to such a big thing, it's almost like, all right, well, let's knock out the fourth quarter by.
We see, I have often said on the Pike and Iron side, when you're looking at very small franchisee location communities, we tend to think of our customers in terms of the number of locations. Because the store, as opposed to the employees or quote unquote users, the store is a reliable entity of revenue that's going to be there. Right? It's going to be there for years. So as that thing grows, you may invest in a platform now that's going to be able to scale very nicely as your network grows. If you get it right early, you get it right for always. And that's something that I think these young franchisees have the opportunity to do. Whereas when you turn around to a big organization, you often find headquarters staff has been stressed for so long by so many one-off requests that there's just a fatigue kind of sets in. And so how do you break that? And also trust, between the franchisee and the franchisor might get worn thin in those larger environments. Whereas in the green fields that you're talking about, everybody is still optimistic, idealistic, and they're all pulling on the oars in the same direction, which is I'm sure a really inspiring place to be.
Yeah, I think there's two dynamics I want to speak to on that. So I've been on both sides of that fence, right? So when a larger organization, there kind of comes a tipping point. So this one younger organization I'm working with is doing everything for these owners, and I'm like, y'all, you're gonna hit you're just gonna hit a brick wall. Like you can't be offering to do their accounting for them and doing like they're doing everything, and I'm like, you got to make money. If you want to exist and you want to scale, you need to make sure that you're making money. And then this organization, they're not yet. And so I'm like, all right, there's going to be some painful decisions we need to make, but you still want to add value, but like you just can't be doing everything for these people. And then I think back to the topic where you're saying, hey, these big organizations do get burned out. It's also been my experience. What happens is to the same point of, hey, we need to teach them how to fish because we can't, as a franchisor marketing department, manage the same expectations we did when we were smaller. Everything can't be on a silver platter for them anymore. We need to say, here it is. And then if they need help, they can raise their hand. But it is kind of that pain with growth, whether you're smaller as you are getting bigger and bigger.
The insights that you bring, born of experience, are just really the heart of what we try to work on every day. So I'm enthused to hear. Yes, I'm enthused to hear about it. I also realize that you have a hard stop, and I want to let you go before your next meeting goes. So, guys, stay tuned. Thank you so much, Heather, for being with us today. Guys, stay tuned. We're going to try and get Heather back from Franchise Marketing Gurus for another episode here, the Creative Operations Podcast 2.0. So hang in there with us, and everybody have a great day.